Welcome back to the Coach Mark Gottfried Show. Today, I've got a incredible young guy who's making some serious waves across social media, but college football, sports in general, and he's just done a fantastic job. And so I've been looking forward to this one for a while. But welcome into Adam Breneman, former college football player at Penn State and UMass. Great to have you, Adam.
Coach, appreciate having me on. Excited to dive in. Been loving what you're doing with the show. I've seen the social media content, so excited to talk about it.
So, Adam, talk about, you're a pretty good football player, obviously tight end, and, had a good little run and some injuries kind of crept in there on you. But where did your love of football begin? Where did that start for you?
Man, my love for football started when I must have been in elementary school, middle school. My dad played football, D3 football in college. He played at a school called Delaware Valley College. And my dad, I kind of grew up following football, but even like Division III football. I remember going to their D3 games, and my dad played tight end. So I always grew up wanting to be a tight end, just like my dad. I went out in the backyard, ran stick routes. I was running I was practicing from a young age to play football. I wanted to play earlier than really my parents would let me. My parents wanted me to wait. I don't know exactly what the time range was or the age range, but I wanted to play when I was pretty young. My parents had me wait. And Coach, I'll tell you, I remember my first year playing, must have been like midget football. I was probably in middle school. My first year playing, it was tough. It was that summer conditioning, even when you're that age. I remember walking off the field after one of my first couple of practices when I'm 13, probably younger, 12 years old, and trying to quit. I remember telling my mom, I don't want to play football. This is too hard. I hate this running. And my mom said, you get your butt back out there. You are not quitting. She said, you're going to go through a whole season, and then after the season, if you want to quit, you can quit. But right now, you're not quitting, and I'm your mom, and I'm in charge. And I stayed. I played that season, ended up loving it. And I think often about, I give my mom a lot of credit, because if I would have quit at that time, as you know, I probably wouldn't have ever played again. And it's a moment I come back to a lot, and just perseverance. And if you just stick things out a little bit, a lot of times it ends up working out.
It's amazing. It's so true. And, Adam, I have a good friend here in Newport Beach who wrote a book called After the Game. His name is Jay Dixon. He was a quarterback at Nevada, and he talks a lot about transitioning from, being an athlete and then, potentially into the business world, and really kind of gives a roadmap. But for you, because you're having a lot of success right now, as a broadcaster, you've got a great presence on social media. You've got great insight, especially into college football. But as you transition from being a player and then taking on new endeavors, what were the lessons for you that you learned? We all learn certain things being involved in athletics. And then those things carry over. Like for you, what would some of those be that you feel like right now, today, you've learned those things because you were an athlete?
Yeah, great question. One of the first things that came to mind as you were asking that question, I learned from James Franklin, head coach at Penn State, when I played for him. He used to always talk about the power of a positive attitude. And I remember when he first got to Penn State, I was on his team in that first couple of years when he was as the head coach there. He's obviously still there now. He would always talk about positive attitude. We'll have a positive attitude in everything we do. If you're not positive, get the heck out of this organization. No one likes people who aren't positive. And I at the time thought it was a little bit corny. I'm like, what's he talking about? Positive attitude? Let's just play some football. But I have seen firsthand now throughout the adversity in my career, in my playing career, and in life now, the people who have the ability to view things in a positive light usually come out on top at the end. And it doesn't mean that everything's rainbows and butterflies all the time, but it means that, are you a person that people like to be around? Are you someone who gives energy and doesn't take energy? Everyone knows the people you work with and when they walk in the room, you're like, inside, you're kind of like, oh, I don't want them to be in here. That's because those people have bad energy. They're not positive people. And I've always tried, even through the ups and downs of my career, to be positive. And I think if you asked my teammates when I was playing, and as you mentioned earlier, my career was faced with a lot of high highs and some low lows. And I think even in those moments of low lows, if you ask my teammates about me, I think they'd all say, man, like you would never know Adam was going through what he was going through, or he's always been positive. So I try to live with that every day. And now as a leader in building companies and in media, when I look at people that I want to have around me, I say to myself, when I'm around this person, does it make me want to work harder? Does it give me energy? Does it make me happy? And if it doesn't, they probably don't have great energy, and they're probably not positive. So I'm always looking for those positive people who, no matter what the circumstances are, they wake up and they're happy and they're positive about the future. So I think that's a big thing, and I'm sure you've seen in your career the players that you're probably coaching that the guys who have a positive attitude about everything usually end up being the best players.
You know, it's interesting, Adam. That's I love your answers and your comments. And it's interesting how coaches can have an impact, even with something like that some people might say, that's kind of a simple thing, but it definitely made an impact. Yeah. And, you know, when I coached for years and years, and I used to coach for a guy named Jim Herrick at UCLA, and we won a national championship, but he used to have this funny thing that we did, and the players actually kind of laughed about it. But, you know, his thing was, which then I carried this on all through 30-something years of being a head coach. If we asked our players and said, how are you doing? Just a simple question. How are you doing today? They had 1 of 5 answers. Good, great, terrific, fantastic, and sensational. And you would be surprised at how many times you said to somebody, I'd go across campus and, excuse me, I'd see somebody in the dining hall and say, you know, hey, Darius, how you doing? And he would say, Coach, I'm sensational. And just being positive like that, even in that moment, it makes such a difference. So for you, it's interesting how that then carries over probably into everything you do every day after you get yourself out of bed.
It's so true. And I've learned as I've just matured. I'm 30 years old now, and I'm a lot different. I'm a completely different human being than I was when I was playing football. It's kind of crazy to think about now, but I've learned, but I did this when I was playing, and I've learned it now even more. I truly believe in the power to control your mind, that like we have that ability as human beings. We are powerful creatures. And if I get in a rut of having negative thoughts, I kind of snap out of it by reminding myself, like, you have the power to be positive. And to your point about, you know, just answering the question, hey, how you doing? Oh, it's another, just getting through, you know, another day, another dollar. Like those. If you answer that and say, hey, I'm sensational, it actually makes you feel sensational, even if you weren't feeling that way. And even little things. I remember when I was playing before games. I mean, just like positive self-talk. I remember, like, you know, saying things to myself, like before we would kick off, telling myself, hey, you're the best tight end in the country. You're the best tight end in the country. You're the best tight end in the country. And it sounds kind of egotistical when I say it like on this podcast, but even as a broadcaster in business, so I'm doing a big deal. I'm like, before that, I'm kind of saying, I'm giving my positive self-talk of, hey, you're an elite broadcaster. You're an elite, so that you have that in your mindset, and it kind of helps ease your nerves, and it kind of falls into that, like, you are who you think you are. And if you think you're great, if you think you're positive, you're going to be positive.
And the flip side is if you've convinced yourself you can't do it, then you're probably not going to be able to do it. So on top of that, because, you know, you can tell with your persona, you know, the way you are and kind of you know, all that you're doing in broadcasting and different areas of your life. But how about some of the other things? Like, you know, I've always said, like, even the athletes that I've had, you know, they have been through, from a work ethic standpoint, their bodies have been pushed to the limits. You know, we do that as coaches. You're trying to push them to a limit to where they feel like they can't, you know, really go any farther. They can't lift another weight. They can't run another sprint, but then they do. Then they feel good about it, and that sense of accomplishment. But for you, the work ethic and the attention to detail, it has to now, and with what you're doing now, it has to be something that really is in your favor.
Yeah, I'd say there's so many lessons. I could go through a bunch of them. I think a few other ones that come to mind is, you mentioned attention to detail. I'm just being around some great head coaches and watching how these guys operate. I think about, you know, Bill O'Brien at Penn State and James Franklin and Mark Whipple when I was at UMass, and even interviewing guys now like Dan Lanning and Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. the amount of attention to detail these guys have is really remarkable. I mean, there is not a single stone unturned from everything, from the color of the freaking shoes the guys are wearing to what the sign says walking into the door to why is there a piece of trash on the ground right here to everything to who they're what players they're signing. And I asked James Franklin a question when I interviewed him recently. I said, as I said, Coach, I know how obsessive you are about this program. What's the one thing that keeps you up the most that you think about? He said all of it, because every single detail matters. And it's kind of interesting to think about because like all the things these guys have, these head coaches, and better than anybody, all the things on your plate, and these coaches are thinking about even the smallest detail of what happens in the organization. So it reminds me that that everything matters. It all matters at the end of the day. Another one I thought of when you asked about that was, I think when I was younger, I spent a lot of time worrying about things I can't control. When I was playing in my football career, when I was in college, I remember thinking a lot about how some of the guys I was competing with were performing. You get in that habit of, hey, I'm competing to be the number one receiver on this team. How's my teammate doing who I'm competing with? Oh, did he have a good practice today? How many passes did he drop today? What's the weather going to be like at practice? Because I don't like catching the ball when it rains. But those are all things I have absolutely no control over. And so I've matured and adjusted that where, man, if I can't control it, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to worry about it, because that's a trap you fall into that just drains your energy if you start worrying about things you can't control. So there's been a lot of things, and a lot of it comes from being around those great head coaches, but also living it and living those mistakes and saying, man, I really wish when I was a freshman at Penn State that I focused more on myself and didn't focus so much on what everybody else was doing.
Mm-hmm. Great insight, Adam. It's changed. The landscape has changed. So, years and years ago, I worked at ESPN, and, the outlets for broadcasting were pretty much, ESPN and Fox. And, there were a few of these kind of streaming things that were popping up, but it wasn't very prevalent at all. And so if you wanted to get into that profession, it was a very kind of a narrow gate to go through. But now it seems like, and you, I think, have done a great job with this, there's so many different platforms where you can get your message out, you can be seen, you can get that exposure. So for you, you're kind of navigating, although you weren't around 20 years ago doing this, but talk a little bit about all the different ways, because I think you're taking advantage of a lot of those as far as becoming a personality on TV or in the media that has a strong, really good voice, especially when it comes to college football. But talk about the landscape nowadays and how this works.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've learned is that every attention is on this thing right here, the cell phone. And that's where everyone lives. That's where everyone's looking. That's where attention is. And when I got into media, I really took a social first approach. I said to myself, I'm going to go all in on creating content on social media, and then whatever comes of that will come. And I went all in on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter, now X, and Facebook, and started creating videos just with my iPhone, filming videos, editing them up and posting them, talking about my experience and really in college football, talking about my career and what it's like to get recruited, and behind the scenes of what it's like to travel with a Power 5 football program, like all that kind of content. And it did really well. And also, the one thing I've learned is just the power of that content, because every opportunity I've had, whether it's broadcasting for CBS, whether it's my podcast, whether it's businesses, whether it's almost every opportunity has come from that content. It started with, hey, I've seen your videos, I love your content, can we work together? And it has showed me that attention is really the currency that we're all playing with in business and in media. That it is attention controls opportunity. And And I've seen that attention is on that phone, it's on social media, and that's why I've kind of, from day one, invested in a team around me to create that content. I mean, Coach, we may be, while we're on this podcast, my feed is probably posting videos. Right? I'm probably posting content right now that my team has edited and created throughout the day of me talking. And I feel bad for my team. They got to see me talk all day, every day, editing videos. But it has to get repetitive. They've heard the same stories over and over again. But it's powerful, and I've seen that content firsthand. And honestly, it's probably how I saw your show when I first reached out. When we got connected. I mean, just think about those connections that never would happen if it wasn't for the content.
It's interesting too because one, you have to be good at what you're doing, which obviously you're very good at it, and you've done a great job of kind of creating that, that momentum for yourself. And for you, is there a if you look down the road, is there a place like, boy, if I could ever land on that one or that show or that platform, is there anything like that for you right now?
Oh, man, good question. I'd say I don't know what my North Star is. I get asked that a lot possibly because I do a lot of different things. I have my podcast, I have my broadcasting, I have the content, I have some of the business interests, and I do a lot. I'd say my short answer is I want to keep improving all of it and keep doing everything. I want to do it all. I know myself, and I enjoy doing multiple different things. I'd say, the TV game has always interested me, and getting on that big stage on television is exciting. I love calling college football games because you get to be there in the action. It's the closest thing I've seen or I've felt to actually playing or coaching. Right? When you're about to go live on air, the producer's counting you down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're on air. It's national TV. And you've done some, as you said, some work on the media, the broadcasting side. I mean, I love it. So getting to do more and bigger games, I think would be awesome. And just building the whole ecosystem around, whether it's my content, the podcast, everything. I think the more they all kind of play into each other, the better my podcast is, the more broadcasting opportunities I get, and so forth. So I'm excited about it all. I'm definitely in 30 years old in kind of the building phase right now of my life and my career, and have been spending a lot of time on it. But I'm hopeful that piece of it continues to grow, and I can kind of reach more and more audiences and more people over television.
I don't think there's any question that you're going to. Your future is really bright. You're gonna do some amazing things. Let's bounce around here a little bit and talk a little bit more about kind of the state of things today with college athletics. You played, football at Penn State, then you went to UMass. I coached for years and years, and so, we from different perspectives here. It'll be interesting. I want to hear your take, but before we talk NIL and the portal, we'll get to all that in just a second. I got to tell you, when I was in college, I was a basketball player at the University of Alabama, mid-'80s. And in that era, in the mid-'80s, Alabama in football and Penn State, it was a phenomenal intersectional rivalry. I mean, it was unbelievable. They played every year, and we watched the games. And, I mean, it was just, whether they were at home or up there. Matter of fact, I remember in 1984, we had Walter Lewis was our quarterback. He throws a touchdown pass to Preston Gothard in the back of the end zone. I think it was 84. And referee called him out of bounds. We thought he was in, it was before instant replay, all that stuff. Yeah. But is Penn State football now, and you're close to that because you spent some time there, is their rival, who is their rival in your opinion? What is their truest rivalry?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's actually there's a saying at Penn State. If you walk around the Penn State football facility, there's actually a sign that says unrivaled. And I think it's certainly a play on words that Penn State's unrivaled compared to everybody else. But I think it also is a play on that. I'm not sure Penn State has a true rivalry. You think about the landscape of the conference, and Penn State. I think most Penn State fans would consider Ohio State or Michigan or someone like that a rival, but the reality is Ohio State and Michigan don't consider Penn State their top rival. They consider each other their rival. I think there's a rivalry brewing with Maryland, but I don't think Penn State will ever truly view Maryland as a rival the way that Maryland views Penn State as a rival. Yep. Like Maryland takes that game a little bit more seriously than maybe Penn State does from a rivalry standpoint. And then you think about Penn State and Pitt, maybe, but they don't even play each other. You think about some of these other teams. I don't know if Penn State has a true rivalry, and I think it's interesting. When the Big Ten, when they did their scheduling and they canceled the divisions in the conference, so every team plays everyone. The Big Ten actually has protected rivalries for different teams that ensures they play every year, because the rest of the schedule is just random. It's just randomized. And Penn State's the only team in the Big Ten that doesn't have a protected rival. So that tells you right there, there's no rival for Penn State, and I think Penn Staters embrace that.
Last question about Penn State. Can they catch – let me – better way I'm going to ask this question. What do you think has to happen? Because I think James Franklin does a great job, but he is sitting there looking at two monsters in Michigan and Ohio State in college football. And obviously when Jim was there at Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, and then what Ryan Day has done at Ohio State. But what has to happen in your view for them to take that step and just kind of – it's almost like getting over that last hurdle. They've gotten everything kind of done. They've cleared every hurdle, and now they're right there for that last one, which is both Michigan and or Ohio State. What has to happen?
Yeah, I mean, Penn State's as close as you could possibly imagine to that elite tier in college football. I mean, they are in the elite tier. You think about the consistency, though. I mean, there aren't many programs that have been more consistent than Penn State over the last few years of college football than they have. I mean, and then in the year one of the playoff, of the expanded playoff, to make the college football playoff, to make it to also to host a home game in Beaver Stadium, to win that game, to make it to the semifinal game, and really be one play away from playing in the national championship game against Ohio State. They're right there. I think if there was any missing piece last year, it was the fact that Penn State lacked really an elite wide receiver talent in that room. They didn't have an elite receiver that could win one-on-one. There has to be someone on your roster who, when everyone knows you got to throw the football, it's 3rd and 15, someone has to be able to win. Someone has to win their one-on-one rep. Penn State didn't have that. This year, though, I mean, you talk about the guys coming back. Drew Aller, who probably will be a top couple pick of the NFL draft next year, comes back at quarterback. The two of the best running backs in the country come back. Penn State went out and got some big-time receivers in the transfer portal. A ton of the defense comes back. And then Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator at Penn State, who Penn State just got from Ohio State after winning a national championship. He's probably the best defensive coordinator in the country. And they spent a lot of money to get him. I mean, probably the highest-paid coordinator in the country. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's confirmed that he is the highest-paid assistant coach in college football. Penn State has certainly put their money where their mouth is and has said that the resources are there. I mean, Penn State was in a resource deficit for a while compared to other programs in the country. There was not a commitment at the same level that Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon and all these other programs had. Penn State was behind. And to Coach Franklin's credit, he was always saying, if the expectation of me is to beat Ohio State and Michigan, why would I not have the same resources that they have? And now he does. And you know what that means. You got the resources. It's time to go win. And a lot of guys coming back. There's a lot of excitement around that program. And Coach Franklin's really good at getting the guys to stay laser focused, not think about the outside noise. But there's a lot of excitement in Happy Valley right now. And I think they'll be a preseason number 1 or number 2 team in the country.
So let's jump a little bit here now to NIL and the portal. You've talked about it ad nauseum. I have. I mean, it's the topic of the day in college athletics. It's we've never seen a landscape shift like this one. We've through the last 30 or 40 years, there's always a tweak here. It's a rule there. We're adjusting, but now all of a sudden this thing is wide open. So what is your general feel, just kind of at a high level, and then we'll dig down, but generally speaking, what is your feel with NIL and the college transfer portal in college athletics?
I mean, I'm a fan of the transfer portal and NIL. I'll say this. The college athletics has been a business for everybody but the players for a long time. I mean, it's been a business for the administrators, for the coaches, for the even the fans, the media companies, the TV networks, the vendors in the stadium, the people who own the real estate that the stadiums are in. I mean, it's been a business for every single person and group involved in the sport, other than the players. this has been a long time coming, and it's about time that the players have a seat at the table as well, and have a chance to make money on their hard work. I mean, again, I'm a guy a great example of someone who had a great college career, didn't play in the NFL, and didn't make any money playing while my jersey was sold at the bookstore downtown. And just it was unspoken. Number 81 was sold at the bookstore. Well, I was number 81. Yeah, like it's like people they acted like, oh, just a random jersey. Well, it's not. That's how it worked, and you weren't allowed to get paid. So it's been a long time coming. It's a great thing for the sport. I think, like anything, a lot of times when something new comes, when there's innovation, organizations have a tendency to overcorrect in one way. And I think we've overcorrected in favor of the players. I do. I think we've overcorrected where players now are getting tons of NIL money, not having to sign contracts, not being held to the same standards that professional athletes and coaches are held to, where, if you're a coach, yes, it's a business for you, but you can't just pick up and leave. You got to buy out. You have a contract you sign, where players right now can transfer unlimited amount of times. And so I think we'll go back. I think we will correct back a little bit to making it more of a level playing field, everything that the players want and the coaches want, and where it makes sense for everybody. But I think the biggest issue in college sports right now, the biggest issue, is that the powers to be, whether they're administrators, whether they're conference commissioners, refuse to say what we all know. They refuse to say that the athletes are employees. And that's just what they are. The athletes are paid for a service to support the enterprise of the school, of the athletic department, of their sporting program. And if they don't perform, they're probably getting kicked off the team. They're moving on. They're transferring somewhere else. They're getting paid to do that. That is an employee. And there should be employee contracts, and athletes should be treated as such. And it'll be the best thing for the athlete and the best thing for the schools. But all these administrators refuse to acknowledge that because, as anything, everyone's afraid of getting sued. They're afraid if we acknowledge now that athletes are employees, well, the athletes from 5 years ago, are there a bunch of lawsuits coming because they were employees back then and we didn't pay them? So I think that's a big issue right now that needs to be resolved. It's going to take some bold leadership. I don't have all the answers. I just know, for one thing, those darn athletes are employees. And I think the sooner we acknowledge the reality, the quicker we'll find the solution.
I love your answer because I agree with you. I think it's a great thing that some kids get to make money. I would love to see if I was commissioner for a day, if they put me in charge of the NCAA. Yeah. And, the thing that people don't realize is, and I sat on boards at the NCAA for years and National Association of Basketball Coaches Board, and we met with Mark Emmert and all the people there constantly every year. There's always lawsuits coming. And so they're always trying to weigh the balance of a lawsuit. Can we win it? Can we not win it? Here comes one. What's going to happen? And but if there's a way to go back and say that you can transfer one time without sitting out, or if your coach leaves, there's a coaching staff change, but maybe after that we go back to potentially sitting out, because I think what's happening right now, Adam, and it bothers me, is part of college athletics, I love guys getting paid. I think it's great. They should have been getting paid a long time ago, and I agree with you. We used to sell jerseys in the bookstore, and they were one of my players' jerseys, and they didn't get any money. But at the same time, we've got to find a way to get rid of strictly I'm going to pay you some outrageous amount of money, whether you've played a second or not, with no contract. There's you can leave mid-year, you can leave at the end of the year. I would love to see us find a way to put some regulations involved to where kids can still get paid. They can still transfer one time without sitting out. But this wild free-for-all, and you made a great point, Adam. When I coached at NC State, I had a $3 million buyout in my contract, and I had other schools that would, inquire, would call my agent. Would he have interest? Well, I'm bound to that school unless somebody pays the buyout. It might be the next school. It might be me. But I think if we get to some things like that, it might calm this down just a bit. What's your thoughts on that? Yeah.
I mean, I love your idea there of the one-time transfer. Then you got to sit out. Listen, I think there's a lot of proposed solutions out there. I think the other piece of this, and as you can probably tell, I have a tendency to advocate for the players in all this, while at the same time acknowledging that players shouldn't be able to just have a free-for-all and make millions and have no consequences when it doesn't go well. I mean, hey, if you're making millions, all of a sudden when fans start to complain about the college athletes and on social media, everyone's like, oh, they're just kids, Well, not when they're making $2 million a year. They're not kids anymore. Now you're an adult, and now you get criticized online when you don't play well. Just like if you didn't win a game as a coach, you had to go you had to face the music and answer for why your guys didn't play well. So I have a tendency to support and lean towards the players. With all that said, I think one big issue is that the players don't have a seat at the table in all this decision making going on. You think about the NFL and the Players Association in the NFL, and you think about the NBA Players Association. I was at the College Football National Championship weekend, and all the commissioners and ADs are there meeting about the future of college football. They're all having these meetings talking about how do they want revenue share to look? What should NIL be like? But, Coach, who's nowhere to be found? The players. The players don't have a seat at the table. They don't have a representative in those conversations saying, whoa, if we're going to play 5 playoff games, what are we doing about the rest? Are we just going to go play 18 games now in college football? What are we doing to protect the players? So I think we need, and this is part of the employee conversation, players, if they're employees, now you can get the collective bargaining where you can have representation for the players. I do think they need a seat at the table. It's quite frankly not fair that they don't have someone representing them in those conversations with the commissioners and with the athletic directors. The other thing is, when it comes to college football and men's basketball, the sports that you and I know well, and the 2 biggest revenue sports in college athletics. If I said to you right now, hey, who's in charge of men's basketball in college? Or if I said to you, who's actually in charge of college football? I'm not sure you would know who to tell me. I'm not sure I know who's in charge of college football. Is it Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner? He's probably the most powerful man in college football. Is he the one in charge? Is it the president of the NCAA? Is he in charge of college football? Is it the Big Ten commissioner? I don't know. And that's an issue. If Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, is the guy in charge of college football or men's basketball, well, the issue is that Greg Sankey may be in charge of college football, but he's also in charge of men's basketball and field hockey and swimming and diving and all these other sports where these major sports, which are massive enterprises, don't have anyone looking out for them every second of every day. They don't have a true leader. Men's basketball doesn't have someone saying, what's the best thing for men's basketball? Because that may be different than what's best for football. That's different than maybe it's different than what's best for women's basketball. Maybe it's different than what's best for lacrosse. And these major enterprises need to have a commissioner of basketball, a commissioner of college football. And there needs to be a true leader looking out for the best interests of the organizations.
Well said, Adam. Absolutely well said. First of all, the athletes now, they are professionals. Let's just call it what it is. They're pros. It's not like it used to be where I just got my books and tuition and room and board and I went to class. They're pros, period. And if they're going to pay somebody $1 million or $2 million or $200,000, doesn't matter what it is, you're now a pro, period. And I think that your comment is so true because we've said it for years in basketball. It's like a recruiting calendar or the recruiting rules. They're different because the calendar's different and high school sports are different. And so what might work in football may not work in basketball, or it may not work in tennis, or it might not work in track and field, whatever it might be. Yeah. And if each sport had their own person that was in charge that would look out solely for that sport, it's a game changer, complete game changer in college athletics. But I'm with you 100%, Adam. We're talking about they're pros now. And they got to grow some thick skin at times because they've always criticized, get on social media, but now that you're getting paid, a little bit different now because if we're gonna stroke a check, then and you're gonna take the check, then you might want to be thick enough skin to handle some criticism, and I think that comes with the territory as well.
Yeah, no doubt. The athletes got to grow up faster than ever, man. They even think about it in high school. I mean, you're talking negotiating deals when you're 16 years old now in high school, talking to. I mean, there's not a conversation about commitment that goes on anymore in college football where there isn't NIL money being talked about. I mean, it's just part of the game. And I was with a group of 5 coach recently, and he kind of was having a moment where he's like, man, I just had my backup running backs. He said, I had my 3rd string running back's mom just call me asking for $20,000 more. He's like, I can't do this any longer. he's like, I've worked too long and hard to be dealing with this now.
You know what's interesting, Adam, too, and I've said this so many times, especially on all my shows. This all started Ed O'Bannon. I coached Ed O'Bannon for 5 years at UCLA, and he was kind of the catalyst behind the Supreme Court ruling when he sued the NCAA as far as name, image, and likeness. But the thing that bothers me the most too, Adam, and I'd love for you to maybe, carry this water as you go and do all the speaking and do the different things you do. But keep in mind that the NCAA basketball tournament, just the tournament, I always say this, and people they almost raise their eyebrows like, wait a minute, what? They ask the question, is that actually real? Just the tournament, a 3-week tournament, March Madness, not the whole season, 3 weeks, generates $1 billion. I think it's $1.2 billion every year. Just the tournament, and the NCAA, they're not sharing the majority of that money. The majority of that money should go to the student athletes. The majority. Yeah. Not all of it, but the majority. That's where your money. That's the golden egg that, and it bothers me that they haven't. They're not sharing. They're banking on your school, that school, Alabama. You come up with the money. Your boosters come up with the money, but not us. And that's always bothered me from the start with this.
I mean, it's a massive, massive business. I mean, you think about all the adjacent things too that make money off this game of college athletics and college sports. The local businesses. I mentioned, the real estate players, the guys who own the short-term rentals and the hotels on local campuses. I mean, there's so many people making money, and ultimately, it's a good thing that the players can make money now and get paid. I think, with all the talk about, NIL is going to ruin the game and players aren't going to have the same drive. I'll tell you what, last football season in college football was probably the most entertaining season I remember seeing in a long time, and the games were just as good and the players played just as hard. So it's like anything, when there's a lot of change, it gets met with resistance. But as you know, the people who adapt and encourage and take advantage of the change are the ones who will end up ahead. And we're seeing that in the programs that embrace this and say, let's use this to our advantage. Now, this is the rules. We may not like it, but it's the rules we're presented. Let's go take advantage of it.
Love it. I love it. Adam, when you look around the country, and let's go college football here, you look around the country, are there some coaches that would jump off the page at you when you say, because where you would say to yourself, man, that guy is creative, he's good, I would have loved to play for that guy or that guy. Yeah. Who would those guys be for you?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is a guy like Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Just a ball of energy, players coach, the guys relate to him. He's done a great job building that program. I think about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. I mean, you talk about a guy that's impressive when you sit down with him. I interviewed him a couple months ago, got to sit down with him for an hour. And I mean, you leave the room wanting to play at Notre Dame. I mean, the love he has for that place and the way his players respect him, you can see. Dan Lanning's awesome at Oregon. Just a West Coast guy really dominating the West Coast right now, and in recruiting. And I talk about attention to detail and the things he thinks about and cares about. How about Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State? I mean, done such a good job there in a short amount of time. He's 30-some years old. Lifetime dream was to be the Arizona State head coach, and becomes the coach at 31 years old, 32 years old. Just a crazy story, and he's done such a good job, getting to the college football playoff. So, there's so many great young coaches, not just young, but great coaches in college football right now. Sherrone Moore at Michigan, I had the chance to sit down with, who I thought was a really great dynamic coach as well. So it's been cool to see that the the trend in coaching and these college coaches. So many of these guys may not even have tons of backgrounds as like play callers or coordinators, but they're dynamic leaders. They can recruit. They can build a vision for an organization and get everybody else aligned. James Franklin used to always say, a few kind of phrases he had. One was, we all better be singing the same song to the same tune, or we all better be rowing the boat in the same direction. And I think that's what these coaches are so good at, is getting these guys to believe and to everyone stepping in the same pace every single day in the same direction.
How about have you ever? What's your thoughts on this? Because for years and years, and I coached for a long time, and especially in the recruiting game, where now recruiting is different, but when guys left their region, they kind of went from one region of the country to a completely different region. There was a time period where there was the adjustment was a little bit longer, because you're still having to develop the relationship with the high school coaches, and from a recruiting standpoint, you're trying to build your army of people out there that are going to help you. But now it's a little bit different because of the transfer portal, because of NIL. Now you can offer somebody some money and you can grab a player off a different team. But how about Kalen DeBoer? Like, I love Kalen. I'm a fan. I think that Kalen is going to do an amazing job at Alabama. But he also left one region of the country, and I've had him on my podcast. We're going to release his podcast soon. And we talked about that, going to a different part of the country. Do you see that sometimes with coaches nowadays being an issue, or do you feel like, maybe not so much because of the landscape?
Yeah, it's a challenge to go from one completely different region to the other, and those are different regions now. I mean, you're talking Pacific Northwest to the South. I mean, to the SEC. It's different. Now, I've gotten to know Kalen DeBoer well, and I'm a big believer in his as well. I mean, he was really one of the first, when I got into this media podcasting game, what was probably 2 years ago, he was one of the first coaches at a big time program to say, hey, come on out, come visit us. Come watch practice, come hang out in our meetings, and was really supportive. Gave us a tour around campus himself. He was so awesome to be around. And at that moment, I said, okay, this guy, he's innovative and he gets it and he understands. He understood that his players are probably following my content on social media, and he wanted to put it out there. So I got a lot of respect for Coach DeBoer. I think he'll have a lot of success at Alabama, and he knows how to build a program. I mean, you think about what he did at Washington and took that place from not a very good roster to the rise of Michael Penix Jr. and all the wins they had there, and playing in the national championship game. I mean, he did such a great job. He's a program builder. It's tried and true. And I do think to follow a guy like Nick Saban, it takes a guy with a lot of confidence and a guy who's very comfortable in his own skin. And I think Kalen DeBoer is that to a T. He knows who he is. He doesn't care about him getting the credit versus Nick Saban versus what did Nick Saban do best. I actually sat down with him when he was at Alabama as well. This was probably last offseason during his first offseason at Bama. And I asked him, I said, Coach, like, how much of this, how do you balance what Nick Saban did here versus implementing things the way you do things? How do you kind of balance? What do we keep the same? What do we change? And his answer was kind of like, I don't know. Why would you change much around here? Like, the thing that they've won a long way, one way. My ego's not too big to say we got to do it my way now. Yeah. He said we'll change some things that we think we can improve on, but I think that takes someone who's very confident and has a lot of belief in themselves and is comfortable being who they are.
It's interesting in college sports. I went in last year to Tuscaloosa. They played Missouri, and I think they had lost the weekend before somewhere. I can't remember the exact schedule, but I was sitting with the athletic director, Greg Byrne. We were in his office, and, people, the fans, they're starting to bark a little bit. And, we've lost like 2 games at that point. And I remember telling Greg, I said, Greg, you didn't hire him for 1 year. I mean, you hired him to be the coach for 10 years. Yeah. And what people don't understand too sometimes, Adam, when there's a coaching change, especially with a guy like Nick Saban, that big, or a Mike Krzyzewski at Duke, or a Roy Williams, or whomever it may be, Jim Boeheim in basketball at Syracuse, the next person that comes in, you're inheriting a roster that chose to come to Alabama or wherever because of that coach, and that loyalty is there. And so you're the new coach, and you're trying to finesse to get everybody on board. And some guys, it works out. Some guys, maybe it doesn't. But that's part of the transition when you're, going from one coach. I think Marcus Freeman went through that at Notre Dame, and the guy at Michigan's going to go through that following Jim Harbaugh. There's always a little bit of a transition, but the general population of fan, they don't get that part. They get on. They just see Alabama football, a bunch of guys running around in crimson jerseys, and we ought to beat everybody by 30 points. I don't understand. I don't understand how LSU beat us, or I don't understand. And so that transition for all those guys, and then after 2 or 3 years, then it's time to really begin, in my view, to start evaluating to see, okay, where are we? Where's our program? And go from there.
Yeah, it takes time. I mean, even think about Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman. I mean, they lost to Northern Illinois week 2 or 3 or 4 of last season, end up playing in the national championship game. I mean, you think about coaches that are good at overcoming that adversity early in the season and finding out who you are. I'm a believer you have to go through some of that. Kalen DeBoer has to have those ups and downs of they look like the best team in the country one week, and then the next week last year they look like they're middle of the SEC. So I think the coaches who can navigate that, it's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies, not always going to be easy. One of the few guarantees in life is things will not go the way you want them to. So how do you adapt? How do you adjust? And do your players believe and trust in you during those times?
What's your thoughts, Adam, on so I'm living in Newport Beach, California, and Newport Beach, we're about 45 miles south of Los Angeles, just south of town here. But I am living in a USC town. This is a Trojan town. You'll see more USC bumper stickers or flags on a Saturday afternoon for football. And, they kind of took the keys off the bank vault and brought Lincoln Riley to SC. And people, I went to a game last year, sat midfield and watched him play. I think I watched play Penn State. It was SC Penn State game. But
great game.
Just hasn't really gotten that momentum yet that everybody kind of thought he would. And, I'm not in the program every day. Obviously, I sit down here in Newport Beach. But do you see him as a great fit? And do you think that he then can take that step and return USC? Because USC fans now, tradition, location, they feel like they should be right there with Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, Clemson, whoever that may be, Notre Dame. That's where they feel they should be. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a right to think that the USC should be among the elite tier of programs in college football. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Lincoln Riley. I think he took over a roster there that was not built the right way to win in the Big Ten, and that's the reality. They struggled in the trenches and on the offensive line, defensive line, and he's had to really rebuild that thing from the ground up. The positive is, you look at last season, I mean, USC was right there, almost beat Penn State, took them to overtime, and there were some big games that USC was right there in and probably should have won. I think they're close, and I know that USC fans have been hearing that for a long time. This was a major rebuild. Lincoln Riley knows how to build programs. He knows how to win at a high level. He did it at Oklahoma. He's developed great quarterbacks. I'm a believer, and I think even you look at the defensive hires he's made in hiring those 2 defensive coordinators last season, Eric Henderson, Danton Lynn, 2 great hires that are 2 of the best coordinators in the country and now running this USC defense. And that's been an issue at USC, that defensive side of the ball. They were a lot better last year. I think they're really, really close, knocking on the door. And it's a place you can recruit to. And I know Chad Bowden, their general manager, is doing a great job getting guys there. So I'm bullish on USC football. And the one thing about LA and USC, man, if you start to win, that place is electric. That place will it'll be a ton of momentum. It'll be a tidal wave, and LA will have a different feel and a different buzz to it if USC football comes back to relevance. And Lincoln Riley, I mean, I've been around him a little enough to know that I bet he's not sleeping much until that place gets back to the top tier of college football.
As you can tell, although I coach basketball, I'm a huge football fan, college football fan. I think being around Alabama football for so many years, it just becomes part of your, who you are. Here's another one for you. I love I love this conversation. I'm having a ton of fun here, but can Bill Belichick get it done at North Carolina at a level that exceeds expectations? Because, Carolina football, they have never really been in the discussion with Alabama and Ohio State and Penn State and some of those, but they do have potential, great potential. So can he get it done, or are some of these other distractions going to get in the way?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Bill Belichick, and that I'm curious to see how it plays out, is just, so much of college football is about talent acquisition, and can you acquire the best players, and it's very different than the draft in the NFL. It's not just identifying the players. It's can you get them to come to your campus and to your school. And by early signs, they've been recruiting at a really high level. And I know he brought in Michael Lombardi as his general manager there, and I'm interested to see how much Bill Belichick embraces that college game. Being a college head coach is so different than being an NFL head coach. You're dealing with younger players. You're recruiting. Again, in the NFL, you're picking the players that play for you. In college, you got to convince them to come play for you, and the players pick where they go. So I think that's a big factor. It is interesting, and I think Coach Belichick would probably admit it, or at least as a guy who has been so anti-distraction his whole career, seems to have really, I'm sure unintentionally, become the distraction for the program. And when things like that happen, I always think leaders have a great opportunity to either rally your players around you or to really distance yourself from the players. And I think we'll find out pretty soon. Is this moment, did Bill Belichick take advantage of the moment? When you have negative media, when you have people talking about your program in not the best light, when you have those distractions, there's a way, as you know, Coach, to band your guys together and say, hey, they're attacking us. Here's the truth. You kind of have that conversation with your players. Here's the truth. Here's what you need to know. Here's who I am as Bill Belichick, and kind of get that team even tighter than they were before. Or if you're not transparent, and if you get defensive, and if you don't address it, it has a tendency to split the team apart, because the players see that stuff. They're not stupid. The players they can feel it. They know the energy. They're looking to see, how does Bill Belichick handle this moment. And knowing Coach Belichick as a coach, I would venture to say that it wouldn't be smart to bet against him, because I think he knows how to handle these moments. And no matter what you think about how he handled some of the off the field stuff, I think he knows how to get a locker room rallied around and ready to play a football season.
I've told many people, Adam, I think, in my personal opinion, I'm not there. I was in Raleigh for 7 years and right close to there, but I don't think players care. I really don't. Players want to get better. Players want to improve. Players want to make it to the NFL. Players want to win. And they also know, those guys know, they got one of the 2 or 3 greatest coaches, at least in the NFL. And, when you talk about great coaches, he's there. And so I think this offseason, it's interesting for the media, and people are all, they love to post in social media, but I don't think kids, I don't think they care. I agree. I think they just want to win.
The kids want to win, they want to develop, and they want to get paid. That's all they care about.
That's it. Yeah. And you made an interesting point about recruiting and talent. I remember standing in my driveway. I was the head basketball coach at Alabama. Nick Saban had just been hired. And I asked him the question about, Coach, why would you, leave the NFL to come back to college? And I remember him saying to me, he said, in the NFL, he said, we get one first-round draft pick, might find another good player in the draft. Maybe we had a trade, a 2 or 3, or a free agent signing. That's it. Yeah. That's the only way I change my roster. He said, I come to Alabama, I can sign 25 5-stars every year. I can get 20 difference makers and have, my backup, my second, my third team guys are really good. Like the difference. So if Belichick, I'm sure, in the same mindset, he's thinking, hey, I'm going to turn this roster into something that we haven't seen here at North Carolina. And that's the way I think that he's going about it there.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, he's it's going to be the story of the year, no matter what happens. Whether they're good, bad, it's going to be the Deion Sanders story of 2025. I'm excited.
We haven't even talked about Deion, Neon Deion, who I absolutely love, man. I went to Colorado this springtime. I was up there and went into the bookstore, and 90% of everything in that bookstore said prime time. Very, very little that didn't say prime time. But how about him? Give me your take on what's happening in Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, Deion's done such a great job, man. I mean, think about the energy he's brought to that place. I went to a game there last year. It might have been the USC game. I mean, it was like I was at like the movie set. I mean, every superstar you could imagine was there. Sideline was buzzing. You talk about a whole town changing with one guy coming in. I mean, it's just crazy what he's done for that place. Yep. What a hire that was. I forget the athletic director's name, but just an unbelievable hire to take the chance to bring him in. A guy that coached at Jackson State, to bring him to a place like Colorado. Really impressive, man. And he's a great football coach, and he's leading the men the right way, and he's getting the best out of his guys. He's developing players. So I've been really impressed with Deion Sanders, and I think we're going to see that trend in college athletics more and more, where you'll see coaches who have maybe different backgrounds than most coaches had, maybe less experience, but more, that kind of the Deion Sanders effect, the big social following, the prime time, all the cameras are going to show up, the flashy hire, who can recruit, who players want to play for, who can build a program. You don't need to be the best. Does Deion Sanders call the plays? No, he doesn't need to. He's got great coaches that can do that, but he needs to set the vision of the program. I think that'll be the trend we see in college sports.
Adam, before we kind of wrap up, I want to touch on this. When you were in high school, you and I talked about this briefly before we started the podcast, but you got very involved with Project ALS. You were a board member at one time. You helped them raise a lot of money. And talk a little bit about that period of your life, what you kind of went through, what happened, and then, because to me, not only are you doing a great job professionally with what you're doing, your career is on the upswing. It's going to be off the charts here in the next, 10, 15, 20 years. But more importantly, you took a major step to help and to get involved with Project ALS. Talk a little bit about that period of your life.
Yeah, giving back's always been something important to me. I knew, from a young age, as a 5-star recruit, you're kind of given a platform, and I wanted to use it for good. I tell young athletes all the time, when you're playing, when you're an athlete, when you're a big time high school recruit, a Division I player, it's easy to make an impact. I mean, everyone picks up your calls, everyone texts you back right away, everyone follows you on social media, and use it for some good. So when I was in high school, I was a 5-star recruit committed to Penn State to play football, and I had a family friend who was diagnosed with ALS and saw firsthand just how brutal, terrible, just ugly that disease is. And it's without a doubt one of the worst. Mm-hmm. And it has no cure. And I had done some research on it, met some people, and wanted to do something to help. And it was a really cool moment for me. We launched what we called Catch the Cure. And we raised money for Project ALS, which is a great organization that focuses on research and finding a cure for ALS. And ended up raising a few $100,000 for Project ALS through that campaign when I was 17 years old in high school, and saw the community really rally together. And it was cool to see our whole kind of high school community where this gentleman, Tom Kirchhoff, who ended up passing away from ALS, lived, and he played football there, and it was really neat. It was a cool experience for me to see the power of just kind of putting it out there and starting it. All I did was kind of get it out there, put the message out, and it took off like wildfire from there within the community and made a big impact. And as you mentioned, Project ALS is a great organization that does so much good work and is well on their way on that mission to find a cure for that terrible disease. And I've been proud to work with them for years now.
Well, I think, Adam, when people, follow you, you got a ton of followers and people are paying attention to what you're saying, and you do such a great job. But, I think those type of things where outside of, talking about sports, which we all love to do, I love to do. But when you have an opportunity to impact other people and help and contribute, because you just never know where that might lead to. So your legacy is going to be, obviously your impact professionally, but through that lane, I think you're just going to have so many more. So I'm rooting for you, man. And I'm a fan. I'm a fan of yours. I've loved your content. I love watching you. I think you are a star in the making. So again, man, I'm pulling for you and rooting for you. And I just want to say thank you for taking some time to be on my podcast today. I've enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, this was great, Coach. Appreciate having me on. Love what you're doing. If I can ever help you at all, let me know. But I'm honored to be on, and I'll keep tuning in.
All right, there you go. Adam Breneman. He's one of the rising stars in college football and in other sports with his views and his insights. So, Adam Breneman, thank you so much.